Hi everybody, welcome to this GWO Spring Update webinar for the Americas. Very pleased to be here today, whatever time of day it is for you. We've got a great panel of experts, most of whom you can see on the screen. Hopefully what you can also see on the screen is a poll question. And we're going to be using this tool a little bit throughout today's webinar so that we're not just talking at you, you've got a chance to interact with us. It's pretty simple. If you've got a smartphone with you or another browser window, open menti.com, type in the 8-digit code that you see, and just answer that first question that's up on the screen. That'll give us a bit of an idea if you're an expert on GWO or if you're completely new. And it will help us just frame some of the way that we talk and try not to go into too much detail, which as my colleagues and I will know, it's pretty easy to do that sometimes. So while that's on screen, I'll just introduce everybody. So we've got two guests from our North American committee. First up is Wes Witt. Wes is from Siemens Gamesa Renewable Energy. Hi, Wes. And yeah, the microphones are on, I think, for most of you. And from Avangrid Renewables, Christy Abel is with us.
Good morning.
Nice to have you with us, Christy. And then from this side of the Atlantic, my colleagues from the GWO Secretariat are here to answer pretty much any question that you have. First of all, we have our CEO, Jakob Holst. Hi, Jakob.
Hey.
And our Director for Training and Operations, Jakob Björn Nielsen. So there are two Jakobs. I'm going to call you JB when I ask you a question.
Thank you. And hello all.
And finally, Jose Jimenez, who is dialing in from Madrid. Jose is our head of governance and risk. Hi, Jose.
Good morning. Buenos días.
So any questions that come in Spanish, Jose is going to answer them regardless of what the topic is. So Jakob Holst can also dabble in a bit.
Sí, por supuesto.
Yeah. So thanks very much for answering the question. Like I said, we'll be using menti.com a little bit more, doing a little quiz later on, just to keep things fresh and interesting. So let's move on. And I have to switch just briefly to some other images so we can. As you can see, I'm doing pretty much all of this by myself, so you have to bear with me for the technical side of things. So as you probably heard, your microphones are set to mute, but there's going to be lots of opportunities to ask questions. If you do have something you want to ask us, please just type it into the question box and we'll come to those as and when the time comes. Secondly, today's event is going to be recorded. We record most of our webinars and you can find them on our YouTube channel. So if there's something that you miss, you can go back and that should be published tomorrow. There's also plenty of handouts. You should be able to see that in your dashboard. There's copies of the recent annual report, a little brochure on becoming a training provider if that's your thing, and then also some of the documents that we're discussing today. So normally these webinars are aimed at GWO training providers, certification bodies, people who know and are familiar with what we do already. So it's good to see that from the previous item that sorry, someone's just interrupted me in this room. Lost my train of thoughts. So I'll just go through the agenda, shall I? First is quality assurance. In this part, we're going to review the work done to improve governance and quality across the network of GWO training providers. Secondly is training standards. These are our products, the courses that GWO training providers teach, and we'll be showing you some of the newest updates to them with the help of my colleagues. And the third and fourth elements are about the opportunity. The Americas have a huge wind power industry, as we know. You may have seen Global Wind Energy Council's report from the end of last month. They revealed that just in the US alone, 16.1 gigawatts of new capacity was installed last year. That's on top of more than 100 that was in the process of being installed. And then you've got other huge markets like Brazil and Mexico and Canada. So this is why it's good that we've got you, Wes and Christy, with us today to talk about, what that level of activity means and why, as employers, you're planning to help make GWO the go-to safety training for workers in the market. So again, if any questions that come in, please just interrupt me as we go along. So before we get to this, let's go through the new items. What's new at GWO? So when we talk about quality assurance, we mean two documents in particular: the requirements for certification bodies and the requirements for training providers. They exist so that quality can be maintained across the network, and so that employers know what they're receiving. We update these documents a lot, and as we learn new ways to improve and align quality assurance. And Jose, you're one of the people that's responsible for maintaining these documents alongside our members who work with you through the Audit and Compliance Committee. So we'll just begin with the things that have changed in the requirements documents in the certification bodies version 8. These are the rules that authorized certification bodies have to follow. I'll just run through these one by one, and then Jose, if you can just tell us a bit about what some of these changes mean. So first, auditors have to observe 4 people when they're certifying a training course. Secondly, we've updated the qualification requirements that those auditors need to have. Third, and probably most importantly, is that all auditors have to pass our auditor qualification training. GWO can withdraw the approval of an auditor, and finally there needs to be no more than 4 weeks between the quality management system, the QMS audit, and the completion of the audit. So the QMS, am I right, Jose, that's kind of the paperwork side of things, and the completion of the audit will be the point at which the auditor visits the training centre and observes the training and makes sure that everything fits in. Yeah, the final part is that remote audits are now a permanent aspect, and that's kind of connected to the final point. So, Jose, tell us a bit about why, or which of those are the most significant, and what's the motivation behind those particular updates?
Sure. Thanks, Ralph. Well, there's two goals with this review: the requirements for certification bodies. One of them, is drive harmonization, and the other one, is try to increase the quality of, the work that is done by our certification bodies and auditors through a structured, process. And on a structure, audit report that all the auditors can follow.
Yeah.
So simplification, I think, the number of participants in a witness training. Before this, we had, several requirements which were sometimes uneasy to understand, and this trigger, strong variations from audit to audit. From mock trainings to real trainings, and now the magical number is going to be 4. Mm-hmm. So simple to remember by training providers and for auditors. Less than 4, the audit should wait until there's more people in the class. Mm-hmm. So that's I think the area which is gonna simplify more, the way we look at things in the audits. Then, the qualification of audit team members, this is not a drastic change versus what we have. But I mean, it's just to remind that auditor qualification training is going to be a must, starting, with the new requirements. Yep. So, I mean, we started, by qualifying certification bodies, and now, we are qualifying individual auditors in our own scheme.
Yeah. Jakob Holst, you're online with us as well. AQT, auditor qualification training, has been pretty successful so far, hasn't it? There's
yes, yeah, it has been quite successful. I think it, as Jose says, is one of the ways that we get more in control of what's going on and make sure that our auditors know what to do. But it's also for auditors an improvement to the previous control mechanism, which was we said that auditors must have attended a training prior to delivering an audit. And attending a training can be a 10-day cost if you attend a blade repair training, and it doesn't really give you any good idea about what does a good blade repair training look like. So in the auditor qualification training, we give the auditors a sense of what does good look like. How do you recognize a good blade repair training, for instance, in just 2 days rather than 10 days? So there's an improvement there.
Okay. So that was the kind of first element of the updates to that document. For this next part, we're going to remain with that requirements for CBs, but the big change is how certification bodies actually report their work to GWO. All certification bodies have, since I think it's October last year, been required not only to send us a certificate saying, yes, we've audited this training center, but also a report identifying the things that they've observed. I guess the problem really was that if there was a problem with that report, it can delay the training provider's certification. And in some cases, there were problems with the report. So we developed a template, which is now a requirement for all certification bodies to use from the beginning of May. To help out, Jose, you're going to be holding advisory sessions beginning tomorrow and next week and the week after, all in the time zones appropriate to the certification bodies and auditors who are there. And the other sort of advisory point we would say is that this is not only important to auditors themselves, it's training providers who are appointing a certification body saying, please come and certify our training center. You above all should be encouraging them to participate in this and to observe that level of quality control. Jose, tell us a bit about the way that this is going to be implemented. You know, what kinds of things you're looking to improve on.
Yeah, well, I mean, as you all know, GWO is or the GWO training is a private scheme, and the norm we use for the audits is the requirements for training providers, and the way we do the audits is within the requirements for certification bodies. So this tool, it is, once again, I mean, on one side it's simplification because and harmonization, because any training provider, being audited by two different auditors is going to see the same report. So that's going to allow, I mean, easy comparison. And the same, I mean, with auditors, I mean, from different certification bodies, they're all going to be using this tool, and this tool is going to be consistent with our standard, the requirement for training providers, including all the expectations that a training provider needs to comply with, and in a very clear, structured manner. With a clear, understanding of, I mean, the requirements through questions and the witnessing of training, and then the non-conformities generated through the audit. Adding also full details, on the audit in terms of scope and type of audit and many other parameters. So overall, again, the idea is simplification and consistency globally.
So for some one-on-one instruction from the man you see on screen, visit our website. In the events section, you can sign up for one of those advisory sessions, or you can encourage your certification body contact to do so. So now we move on to the requirements for training providers. There are fewer big changes here, so we'll run fairly quickly through them. There's first up is an alternative method for instructor qualification. Then we've introduced new requirements for sites that are certified as on-site. in the webinar last week, when we introduced this to stakeholders in Europe, Jakob, the instructor qualification topic, Jakob Holsat is, raised a few questions. I wondered maybe if you could just sort of reflect on what people were seeing there and where what direction this is going in from the point of view of governance and bringing instructors on board and helping them become part of the framework.
Okay, yeah, so the normal way of qualifying an instructor, maybe I should start there. The normal way of qualifying an instructor to deliver GWO is that first the person participates in the training that he's about to deliver as instructor. Then he observes another instructor, a qualified instructor, deliver the training. Then he co-delivers with the experienced instructor. And finally, he delivers under observation from the experienced instructor and is assessed against his competence, right? So that's a lengthy process. If we use the blade repair training standard again, it will take you roughly 40 days to do this. So there's an alternative to that, which is that instead of participate, and that's also difficult if you're in an area where you cannot attend a blade repair training because you don't have a colleague nearby that can give you access to a blade repair in a new market. So how do you do it then? And we have allowed for a different path where you essentially qualify your instructors by familiarizing them with the topic and training according to another scheme that you can devise, as long as you spend the same amount of contact time as an instructor. And that the final step, the assessment, delivery under observation, is also observed. So that's the alternative method for instructor qualification. In the work plan, we have as well to create a training standard for instructor qualifications. So that's your field, Jakob, Björn, and something that's on your task for the coming half year or so to develop this. And it's primarily a problem in areas where GWO is not so well known and where we need to break new ground with either new training standards or simply we're not present in the country.
What do you think, JB?
No, I mean, I think Jakob Blau is mentioning it quite well. There's no doubt that always when you want to ensure quality, but also you want to expand, having a clear picture of what good looks like is needed. But also in connection to what was mentioned, there's no doubt that there are quite a lot of both training providers out there, but also OEMs and operators, etc., who have a very capable setup for this. So we're not gonna try to say this is the way, as they say in The Mandalorian, but it's more this is a good way of actually doing it, and this is our alternative. Yeah.
All right. So we're pretty much there for quality assurance. I just wanted to run by one quick slide, which actually is looking ahead at what we're hoping to do over the next 12 months. And on the left-hand side, you can see, our main targets are obviously to continually improve governance, and we've gone into details as to why that's so important. Jakob Blau, and maybe Wes as well, it might be worth bringing you in on this. The item on the right of highlighted projects is a new approach to the member commitment. And this is something that we're looking to implement over the course of the next year or so. Jakob Blau, perhaps you could just give us a quick overview of why this is so important.
Right. Behind this, there are two elements to this. One is we have, as part of the member commitment, that you use and recognize GWO training wherever it's practically feasible. So we need to have some more situational awareness about what is that, what is practically feasible, and where is it easy, and where are the challenges. And then that's why we need to have a discussion with our members about how does that commitment, how do you report on your commitment to us and to each other in a way that we can improve the service that's provided by the network. So that's I would say maybe the most important thing about the member commitment model here. Related to this is that what is it that drives growth in the supply of training, GWO training? It's demand. So the more members we have, the greater demand. And if we double our membership, how do we handle twice as many members, which is a related thing to this as well.
Yeah. So, well, we've got a couple of member representatives with us. Wes, let's start with you, because there's obviously a drive that comes from employers saying this is what we want, right? And
yeah, and I think just to chime in on Jacob's comment, I think it's really important that since we have the North America Committee, we have a group of members, and the committee is very active now, and we've got a lot of representation. So we're able to gather some of those obstacles. And we even have a working group now that's the job of the working group, is to identify these particular obstacles in North America that need to be addressed by the training committee, to say these are things that just don't work for us here in North America, and all the members are giving support to say we need to do something with this. Then we can work to solve that problem, whatever it may be. And I think that's key, and also that it's across members, from OEMs to owner operators to the training providers are all represented in the committee and are able to give him feedback.
And Christy, you've just taken up a role as vice chair of the North American Committee alongside Wes. And Avangrid as an owner operator probably has a slightly different perspective, but still a big workforce and so on. But what's your reflections on this topic?
Yeah, very, very proud to be the new vice chair of the committee. Avangrid being the third largest owner operator in the US, we're also a subsidiary of Iberdrola, which is one of the largest renewable energy providers in the world. We hire a technician workforce of, I think we're hitting about 450 technicians at this point. Historically, our talent pool has derived from military, oil and gas, and as the US market continues to grow, the talent pool, we're quite honestly straining for experienced talent, people with the fundamental hydraulic, electrical, mechanical fundamentals, basic safety competency. And I think it's, the value of GWO and the safety training and having that fundamental skill set coming to us. And then when we hire them, we can further develop their skills, their technical aptitude, and it's just the market's growing, and the talent is in demand, and to have people come to us with fundamental skill sets already is highly valuable to us. So fully support this initiative and look forward to being a part to grow it and mature it into the future.
Thanks,
Christy. We're really pleased to have you as well. So
maybe, Ralph, I can comment a little bit. Wes had a very good reflection there. I mean, obviously, GWO is an organization that has global aspirations and be relevant everywhere, but has started from a northern a European context. Siemens and Gamesa being European companies, Avangrid with a mother company also from Spain. But you work in different ways in North America because your regulation is different, your history is different, and we need to make sure that the things that has worked well in Europe also can be applied in the North American context. And I think that's the main drive that we've had with the North American Committee for the past 2-3 years, is to make sure that we get that kind of awareness of what are the differences and how do we have to adapt governance, training standards, wording, even just something like a Slinger signal person, or is that rigger signal person? What is it? I mean, what do we call it? Tomato. It's that those things actually matter, and those are just simple examples.
Yeah.
But that's the kind of things. Those are the kind of things that members will help us improve on.
Yeah.
As you participate in the committees and feedback to work.
And equally so in a Pan-American context as well. I think the same messages apply in Central America and in big wind markets like in Brazil, where they have existing regulatory frameworks. How do they correspond with GWO training? What kinds of discussions do we need to have with employers?
Luckily, we've had some experience, not just from North America, where we did a prolonged 4-day workshop in upstate New York a couple of years ago. But we've done the same thing in China, and we've done it with in France. We've done it somewhere else, and it seems that 95-97% of it, no problem. But it's about identifying those 3 to 5% where we need to tweak it a little bit so that it works. And so far we've been successful in tweaking it so that it still is maintained as a global standard, but where it's the understanding, it's the addition of a mentioning of a national like NC code or what have you, that makes the difference, that you feel that you can comply with also the legal requirements in North America.
And Ralph, if you allow me, I think also it's important with a new market within offshore in North America is particularly an opportunity for us to solve a problem before we have an issue, basically, because in the onshore market we're solving some historical challenges that we've had. In offshore, we get the chance to set the standard out of the gate, and it's extremely important in a market such as that we make the technicians mobile, that they're able to move quickly between sites, and that's where this standardization is extremely important, because we can have them to be highly mobile, reduce the amount of retraining, and just get it down to a small amount of company training that they have to have, and these techs can move place to place. And I think it's critical for the offshore market.
So many opportunities, so many reasons why. Well, we still have a little bit of information about the products and some changes. So Jakob Björn is still here, I'm hoping. So we'll run through those pretty quick. Good to see you again, mate. Lucky he's had a haircut. He's one of the lucky ones. I will move on to the second part of the agenda. And one of the things I want to do before we jump into what's changed is actually just to do a quick reminder of what there is, because it's obvious that there's a huge established market in Europe, and a lot of those training providers are delivering most of these modules that you see on screen, whereas in North America and Latin America, it's mostly the top group, the core modules of basic safety. So that's just a quick sort of emphasis on sort of what the majority of training providers in North America and Latin America are currently doing. However, Jakob Björn and the training development team spend a lot of their time working on the existing training portfolio, updating the lessons and learning objectives contained within them. So we have 5 or 6 of them to just quickly run through now. So basic technical training is now in version 6, and there's updates in there on equipment lists and adapted learning for safer use of hydraulic tools. And I know there are several more, Jakob Björn, which you can tell us about. And also, if anybody in the audience has any questions about any of these training standards, what they're for, any question is most welcome. Slinger Signaler, aka Rigger Signal Person, that's on to version 2. That's been in operation for a couple of years. So as you can see, the change to that is that the duration is reduced a little bit and the content has been simplified. Then there's blade repair, which is a really interesting training standard because it's 10 days long, which makes it much more different. It's very different to the rest of the portfolio. In that case, some of the content from one of the lessons has been reduced, and the time that was saved on that has now been added to one of the other lessons so that the participants can benefit from that area. Sea survival, which, as Wes was saying, is really on the cards in North America's offshore wind, is coming soon. In that situation, it's an interesting case. I think we're on to version, well, as it says, version 14 now of the basic safety training module. So in this case, it's a good example of how the guys, Jakob and his team, look at learning objectives in terms of the knowledge domain. Maybe you could just quickly tell us about what that means, Jakob, because this is around the use of taxonomy, and that's an important thing about how GWS standards work.
I mean, to a large extent, it's about whenever we do something, we put, as Christy talked about, like having the raw talent in the middle, and then we look at the person saying, what is the technician must be capable of knowing, doing, etc. And some of the things, well, the technicians should be aware of, but will not be doing. And this is, if we look at sea survival, for instance, there's a split between the wind power technician and then the seafarer. So the wind power technician should have a good idea of some of the things that goes on a vessel, or if you use, in this case, a self-inflating life raft, but is not the sole responsible for this task. So we measure out, well, are you responsible? Do you need to be knowledgeable? Do you need to have an ability to do something or have a knowledge of something? And then we define that in different levels. But every time it is with the technician at the very center and the task the technician needs to do. We all seen this, and I'm one of them, and you're experiencing it now because you're asking me a training question, so I can't stop talking. And that's also what sometimes happens when you have a very skilled person who's teaching somebody, and they teach them everything. They just front load them with knowledge and things, but it's going to clutter it up because you need to be precise on what is it the person needs to know to be able to do, etc. And that journey is what we focus a lot on, because, see, as mentioned, I can't stop talking now. No,
you've summed it up. Right? You've summed it up really clearly, though, and that's the point. You know, you don't learn what you don't need to know.
Another point that could be made is you always, whenever we change or we have a review, you start looking at what are the risks. What's the risk assessment? Has it changed? If it's changed, we change the training standard. Then you look at efficiencies. Can we gain something from efficiencies by packing things in a little bit different way? And then those are the reasons for the changes.
Exactly, and we have some good examples here. Blade repair, grinding skills going up, right? So you can teach people a lot of knowledge and etc. But actually working on a blade sounds a bit like basic, but the hand knowledge of how you grind a blade, key. I mean, it sounds so banal, but actually emphasizing that also, because we have 10 days here, so important. And you say, well, you can use 60 days for or 60 minutes for adding all sorts of theory, etc. Doesn't matter if the person doesn't have the hands to actually grind the blade. You're just going to destroy it, right? It's so important. So that's one element. Another element, we talked about sea survival. Last one we reviewed this, not this time around, but before. Well, data showed us that nobody really falls into the water. We spent a lot of time training on what to do if people fall into the water. But what the data did show was that people get hurt so much during the transfer, on and off the transition piece, especially going home, naturally, because everyone wants to go home to a hot meal and all that. But so we quadrupled the amount of time we spend on the transfer element, and then we scaled down the elements where people actually did not get hurt or did not fall into the water. We still have it naturally, but we adapt to the risk assessment and to the task and the data we have. But in this case, a very different example, something about your ability and something about actually, well, not getting hurt. Two different ball games.
Yeah, it was good. Good example. Any reflections before we move on, Wes or Christy, on I mean, one of the things that we hope for, I think, is you know, the more data that we receive from you as employers into this process, the better the standards end up being.
And I think, in particular, I'll stick to the offshore piece. It's critical that we learn from folks that have a lot more experience in this area and are able to share from that side of things. So I think it's great that we're able to have this knowledge base. Rev 14 gives us some indication. So there's a lot of experience that came in those 14 revisions, and that helps us. And so yeah, I think it's very important that we have this knowledge base to lean back on in our new market.
Maybe a question, Jakob Bjørn, and exposing my ignorance here. The change from to the knowledge domain for the self-inflating raft, does that have anything to do with the incident that we saw at a training provider earlier this year?
Yes. So I think, and that's a long story to that I'm not going to go into in detail, but we all know when we do a training, there's a logistic behind that. It's like watching a play at a theater or whatever. There's things happening so the training can happen.
Or indeed delivering a webinar.
Yes, exactly. And in this case, there was an incident where some instructor actually, but there were got injured, but there were course participant involved in doing, let's call it a practical element of the facilitation of an exercise, preempting it. And in that process, an incident happened. And they were actually doing something that was not in the training standard.
Yeah.
So here we're trying to, let's call it, zero out the opportunity for failure, right? So we eliminate some steps that are not part of the learning objectives either. And we also say, well, we're going to do this because now we know guaranteed this mistake can't not happen again, even though the incident was not actually part of the training. But because, I mean, let's face it, we all carry things around when we go to a training or do something. Well, you ask somebody, can you please just pack this up or be part of this manual labor? And that was one of the cases. So we adapt.
We had an incident with a self-inflating raft, and it made us look at that part of the training standard. Is it actually necessary? And it turns out it's not really necessary because of the role split between the seafarer and the technician. So better to leave it out and avoid that risk during the training. Yeah.
Great. So really dynamic stuff. And thanks to Jakob Bjørn for explaining with those anecdotes for us, because I think it gave us a good insight. We have a new training standard, which everybody's very excited about. And this is a really good story for, standardization, right? So I'll quickly run through this one. Won't take me long. Lift training user module. So lift by this, for those of you who want a quick reminder, that means the thing that lifts you up the top of the turbine. It's an elevator, I guess, but we're not allowed to call it.
Slide didn't change, Ralph.
Should do.
Okay, not for me.
How's that?
Now it's there. Yeah.
Now we have the guy at the bottom of the turbine. So it's the first of 3 modules. The remainder expected later this year, I think. There are 92 learning objectives, and the course itself can be completed in 240 minutes of instructions. And as Jakob Bjørn will explain, it supports the standardization in safety training for lift users, and thus has a pretty strong business case and lots of support from duty holders. Why is that?
I think we've seen this, and I'm glad this is kind of a new evolution of a journey that we've been on quite a few times. Slinger Signaler, our rigger signal person, is one of the examples where you maybe have a few hundred different variants of the same training, which is for both operators and original equipment manufacturers is quite the hassle to manage, that there are so many different trainings out there within the same area, because what does it contain? How long is it? Is it in levels, etc.? And that is really a complex situation for our members. And this is the same case on the lift training. We're gonna boil it down into one that can be used as a generic one. We see this again, and in that sense, I think quite often people view GWO as it's a standardization body, but we very much follow the same trends and methods that are in the industry. Right now, multi-brand is a big thing. People are doing generic troubleshooting or maintenance or whatever. This is just the same. We're actually just facilitating a multi-brand approach, and we're doing that for the industry. And to take a huge amount of trainings and put it into one is a benefit, and it provides safety, of course, because this is standardized. This is quality controlled training setup, but it's also a cost out. I mean, so there's so many different values to this.
And useful if you have a lift in your turbine.
Yes. Some areas, I understand that there's a lot of climbing going on. I acknowledge that, but if you do have a lift, it's nice.
And this is a good example of how we can give feedback from North America. We don't have a lot of lifts in North America, but there are other apparatus that have hit the market now that are similar to, and so we can address those things. And so it's important for the members to be able to say, hey, I'm starting to install this particular climb assist type device in our turbines, and we're able to feed that back up to the training committee and say we might need to address this in this standard. So I think this is a good example of how we get to work together.
Exactly.
Great, thank you.
Fantastic. So again, what's next? What's coming soon? Putting a lot of emphasis on you, JB. But of these, which would you say is most important for us to highlight from the highlighted projects? You don't have to say it because
I think everything is equally important. The sense of urgency, I guess.
Yeah.
If we look at it from the perspective, which is the very core of what we are, then control of hazardous energy is hugely important. Let's face it. This is dangerous. This is serious business, and it's been a long time coming. So that is very high on the list, but it's also extremely difficult. I mean, like we talk about North America and Europe, etc. But in this case, I mean, Europe is segmented into, and also all other regions, into many different countries. To my knowledge, and Christian West, let me know if I'm wrong here, but also when from a regulation standpoint, just on a state level, it's different here again. If you go into Canada again, if you're in Quebec, something. If you're I mean, this is not simple. But the point again, we want to make generic principle training, and that is the approach we take with something like this. It's very much the same as with working at height. You have different gliders from many different systems, but the training is the same. Then you can do a tiny top off, and then you're good. We teach the principles here. And lockout, tack out, well, that's lockout, tack out. Electricity will kill you. So will hydraulic, stored energy, etc. So that's a big one for us. Digitalization, huge. We're seeing some incredibly interesting moves at the moment. A lot from our members actually, and augmented virtual reality. I find it interesting to see that virtual reality is actually really strong. In many other industries, you see that augmented reality is at the very forefront because, well, you can look through a visor or etc., and then you can be in an environment and you can train in it. But in wind power, you need to shut down a turbine if you want to use augmented. So therefore, you use virtual. So there are many different aspects of this. But working on that from a governance standpoint and supporting that is also very high on where we are. Again, I'm just going on. Apologies, time is running.
I mean, digitalization is an important issue, and it's one that we talked with you about last year, Wes, when we held a webinar on the topic. It was in September time, and it's definitely going to be on the agenda in terms of how we're communicating.
So we all have our different horses to ride here, and for me,
yes, we do.
The other two are perhaps even more important because they're about quality assurance, making sure we have the same type of quality everywhere, and that we can apply the model in many markets. And if I look at the competency feasibility study and access program, behind that is really something that looks like what you know from American Clean Power as micro-credentials, and ways of recognizing competences in other ways than training. And how do we do that? And how do we transition people who work in oil and gas, or working mining, or from the armed forces, or in other industries, and you want to bring them into our industry? How can we recognize their prior training? That's a super important topic for us as an industry, I think, to be able to do that in a way that's consistent, and then that we can trust throughout the supply chain. So we're looking a lot towards the North American Committee for this one, because I know this is one of the ways that the models of work that you are more experienced in compared to the people that we have in our European working groups.
So the next and sort of final topic that I want to go into is about growing the network in North America. And Wes and Christy, this is something that we hope to get your support on. And we've got a little bit of information here which emphasizes some of the strategic goals that we have. And Wes, you're pretty familiar with some of these items. Maybe you can just tell us about the need for us to put a number, for example, on the increase in training providers.
Just to kind of give you an idea, I just wrote down a couple of figures. Came from American Clean Power. There's about just now one. I'll say just for the offshore piece of it, just because it's such a huge growth number for New Jersey. That particular area, there's going to be 7,000 megawatts put into the water by 2035, and in New York alone, 9,000 megawatts in the water by 2035. They're estimating 83,000 new jobs in the Northeast to support the market by 2030.
Yeah,
that we have to have training providers to provide new training. We have to have certification bodies to support those training providers to get them online. And, it's just a huge market that we're growing, and that's just the offshore piece. That's not even talking about the onshore piece, where we need additional training providers across the country. And the more we get people on board as far as new members, and we are standardizing training across the country, it's going to drive more growth, because as we solve a few of these small issues that we have that like we said, as North American market we need to address, the adoption of GWO will continue to grow, and that's going to continue to drive the need for more training providers, and it's just the growth is there. It's significant. So we need new competencies, new competent training providers to be in the network.
Christy, any reflections from your side?
I really kind of wanted to elaborate on that multi-platform variable. So Avangard Renewables, we own and operate 7 different turbine platforms, from Gamesas to GEs to MHIs to Siemens, and to have that standardized framework for a prospective technician to come to us and have skill sets at that baseline level is really important for us. Each turbine has its own configuration and way of operation, and that's how we have historically set up our training programs, is to have that baseline training, and then we put them out to the plants, and then they learn the turbine specific stuff, and that's really where our focus is, at that plant level. So very, very important, and I really love what GWO is doing here to have that type of mindset. Another thing that we continually work on is having multi-turbine qualification technician. So if we have a technician who's working at Gamesa, he can also go work at GE, he can also go work in MHI or Vestas, and to be trained at that baseline level, and then go to the plants and start learning specific stuff about the turbine platforms. And within a couple of years, they're very well versed on all the nuances of the various turbines. So this really is the framework of the future to ensure that we have, a very versatile, a very universal technician coming towards us as prospective hires. So really, really believe in what's going on here. I think the onshore industry is ripe for this type of training offering and training institutions, you know, preparing our future technicians for us to hire. And I fully agree with what Wes has to say about the offshore. You know, we have several in development right now on the East Coast, and more to come. We do have a lot of institutional knowledge from our European assets through the Iberdrola organization, but right now is the time to get ahead of it and start framing out you know, the training framework for the offshore business, because it's coming at us very fast. But to get ahead of it and set that baseline, the timing couldn't have been more perfect at this point.
So we're doing some workforce forecast. Just elaborating on your point there, Wes, and the workforce and the forecasting. We have a number that's about, you know, about 1 technician per 2 megawatts offshore. That's what historic tells us, and we've done a very crude analysis, just looking at and correlating the build out of offshore wind in the major offshore markets to training delivered in sea survival module, and that specific module. So that comes to about 1 technician per 2 megawatt. But if you look at comparing offshore and onshore, arguably, actually, there are more people working onshore than there are offshore per megawatt. So there's a pretty good, you know, rule of thumb. If you're a training provider looking to establish a training center, look around. Look at how many megawatts are installed in your area. How many megawatts are going to be installed in your area. That's your market for delivering training to the wind industry.
And Jacob, in
one
addition to that,
technician per 2 megawatt is what needs to be trained every other year.
and Jacob, one other thing too, on the technical aspect, we have an aging fleet in North America now. So when we start to look at things like blade repair is critical at this point for an aging fleet, because, you know, blade repair technicians are at a premium. They are very busy and it's hard to get. And all the OEMs are trying to, and owner operators are trying to develop their own technicians to do repairs, and having a standard for that is critical. And I think especially in an aging fleet.
So we've only got about 6 or 7 minutes left. So because obviously we've been enjoying ourselves too much. So if anybody in the audience has a question for these guys, then please do ask and just type it away in the question box. We'll run through a few other items and see how much we can get finished. Here's actually a quick look at some early numbers for the first quarter of this year. This is for the whole of the Americas, so not North America specific, but we've got a 20% increase in the first quarter up to the end of March. And this figure that we have here called the GWO Trained Workforce, that means people who have a GWO certificate right now that you, Christy, or you, Wes, could find their certificates on Winder. We're using their Winder ID, and you could say, great, they're trained, they can go work right now. And this is just an emphasis. If you see on the map, the little green dots, those are new training providers that certified last year. And I have some updated numbers. We have, I think, 3 new ones in Brazil just in the first part of 2021. Brazil has actually overtaken the USA in terms of the amount of training that's going on there and the number of people. So time for North America to catch up.
Healthy competition, is that what you're looking for? Just to give you an idea, I mean, how many do we expect in 2 years?
Is that for Wes, or you're asking Wes? I mean, strategically, we're looking to double the size of the network every year, right?
Yeah. That's not even enough to cover the needs. But doubling, I think, is a fairly big ambition. Full well knowing that we will not cover all of the needs. So we'll probably be doubling again 3 years from now.
So 3 or 4 minutes left. Great question from Wayne Johnson. Hi, where can I find out more information on becoming a training provider? Wayne, it's it's fairly simple. You can get in touch directly with us at info@globalwindsafety.org, and you can ask us for support directly, or there's the information on how to become certified at our website, which is globalwindsafety.org, and just click on the Become a Training Provider link. Anything you don't understand, please just ask away. So I don't know if we're going to have that much time, Wes and Christy, if you have any extra time to be online with us now, but I organised a little quiz for everybody, and if you visit menti.com and type in that code again, and I'm just going to switch my screen, and we'll see if we can just have a quick bit of fun with, see how much people have learned. So everybody's getting online, I can see. So all those little icons, that's people joining the quiz. So if you just follow the instructions on screen, answer the questions as they go, and your name will appear on the leaderboard. We've got 5 or 6 questions, so.
All right.
So how much wing capacity was installed in the US? So this is going to get a little bit faster as time goes by. 3, 2, 1.
Yay.
So 5 of you got the answer right. And then after each one of these, it's going to tell us who's winning. So at the moment, Bran the Broken is winning. Congratulations on the first question, Bran. Next question coming up in a minute. Who certifies GWO training providers? I'm not sure if you need 14 seconds to answer this, but we'll see.
No.
So every question, a little bit less time. So 3 of you thought it was us. Thankfully, it's not. Otherwise, we'd be traveling to 385 training centers every couple of years. I don't think anybody can do that.
I love North America, but I'll be out of sleep fast.
So Cynthia's doing okay there. I think Bran is still in the lead, yeah. Next question, the 3 of 6. Faster you answer the questions, the more points you get. What can you do with a person's Winder ID at winder.globalwindsafety.org? Excellent. So just the one person thinking you could book a training. Unfortunately not, but you can find any training provider on the same website.
It's not a bad suggestion. Maybe sometime in the future.
Yeah.
So Bran the Broken is being chased by Cow and Elizabeth. Cynthia's in a distant 4th. How many people in North, Central, and South America have a valid GWO training record? You might have to guess this one because we did have it on a slide.
Yeah.
15,480, which is 11% more than it was at Christmas. Boaty McBoatface there, doing well. Sounds like an English person. So Elizabeth's taking the lead. Congratulations, Elizabeth. See if you can hold it. I really should go to, I don't know, sports commentator school for this.
Yeah. And you're missing the jazz. I thought we were going to have jazz.
No, there's no music in the background either. Newest GWO training standard teaches which skills? Excellent. Everybody was listening. So Elizabeth's still in the lead. Oh, Brand the Broken's completely dropped down to 5th place now. Final question. Who's the best in the Americas?
Not the best.
Well, busiest, shall we say.
Busiest.
Well done to everybody. Thank you for participating. What's that done to the leaderboard?
So now we need to hire Elizabeth.
Yeah, maybe. Elizabeth, please send your curriculum vitae resume. We've got a few questions. Some people just saying, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Are new and updated standards born out of incidents, or are they more based on predetermined timelines? That's from our friend Laura Hastings. I guess it's kind of a pretty big question, but maybe just updated standards. You know, why are they updated? What are the factors that go into it?
Well, I mean, we update and review based on industry needs and safety statistics. That's very much our focus. We have recently moved from having a normal, let's call it ISO-based review cycle every 2 years. Well, we start with, and that's an interesting one in this case with the Slinger. So it's 1 year old. We learn a lot in the first year. And then we change after, or we update after the first year, but then we go into 2 year cycles. It's quite basic. But now we're moving into a new scheme actually, where we are surveying continuously, and then we're updating based on the needs. COVID and digitalization has very much shown us that we need to be more agile and more adaptable to the changes of circumstances. So every 3 months, actually, the training committee sits down and prioritizes what to work with the next 3 months. Whereas we normally had a 1 year or 2 year plan laid out in front of us. But having worked with, and I say this with love, care, and respect, having worked at a few wind power companies, I have not seen anyone being able, any of those, to go through a 2 or 3 year strategy without changing it at least 5 times. So I think we should do the same.
But fair to say, members decide, and they decide based on risk assessment and needs.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very much so.
So there's a whole lot of inputs that go into that decision. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you for participating. Thank you, Christy and Wes, for your insights. Thank you, Jose, Jakob, and Jakob. And thank you, audience, for joining us. It's been fun. The quiz worked. So, really pleased with that. That was the best part. So, any final thoughts, Jakob?
Yeah, just great participation. Thank you, Wes, Christy. Looking forward to drive this work with you guys over the next year or so. Hopefully we have an autumn release as well. We can repeat the quiz from Ralph with new topics. And for anyone
slightly
who's
more challenging questions.
You know, we love getting questions, and we would like to answer all of your questions. Put them to info@globalwindsafety.org so that we can make sure that there's nothing that no doubts that are left unanswered. And if you're a new training provider, we will help you as much as we can to get you onboarded, because you are needed. And we'd love for you to join the community.
So there we go. Thank you very much, everybody. We're signing off now. So have a good day, morning, afternoon, evening, and take care.
Bye.
See you later.